Walter Owen Bentley's roots were in the construction of steam locomotives. This might explain a lot for a start. Richard Charlesworth's job is to drive Bentleys and above all to represent them. He knows the history of Bentley motor cars like no other.
This is one of the famous Bentley Blowers. It's a 1930 Bentley 4.5-litre supercharged, known affectionately as the Blower. It's one of 50 road cars built to homologate the car for racing, and then there were a further 5 team cars produced, run by Tim Birkin, known as the Birkin team cars. So 55 in total. This is one of the 50 road cars. First of all, it's great fun. I mean, it's a big car, as you know. This was the car that Ettore Bugatti described as the fastest lorry in Europe at the time, because they kept beating Bugattis, of course. But it's because we don't drive the car a lot in the winter months, I'm just getting used to it again. But it's great fun to drive, and once you get the hang of it and get into the rhythm of it, it's quite straightforward to drive. A little more complicated than a modern car, but still great fun.
Anyone who has once heard the sonorous sound from 4 barely dampened long-stroke cylinders, accompanied by the howl of a gearbox that has just meshed, will find it difficult to get this symphony of cast iron and steel out of their heads. And anyone who has had the opportunity to experience a Bentley Blower driven at speed knows what Bugatti meant when they called it the fastest lorry.
Everybody recognises this car. I think it typifies the sort of boy's own spirit of the 1920s and 30s. It attracts attention wherever it goes, and people admire the motor car, so it makes me very proud to be able to drive it and to represent the company driving it. So it's a thrill in that way, but it's great fun dynamically. At its time, it was a very modern motor car, 4 valves per cylinder, overhead camshaft. It was a very modern car, and still today it performs very well. And with the right road conditions and the right weather conditions, there can be no finer way to spend a day in Austria.
The Bentley 4.5-litre compressor, or Bentley Blower, impresses by its size on the one hand, and on the other by nice touches such as advanced technology. The small Brooklands windscreen offers passengers hardly any protection from the raging wind inside the Vanden Plas body. Bentley themselves only constructed the chassis for this car. The manufacture of the superstructure was outsourced. Since these cars are used for races, quick-release wheels are obligatory. The biggest fascination in the Blower comes, of course, from the engine. Under the bonnet, 4 pistons work in cylinders which are around the size of a beer stein, a bore of 10 centimeters and a lift of 14 centimeters. From the electrics to the oil supply, everything is solid and handmade in perfect quality. As previously mentioned, W.O. Bentley was a fan of size. Bells and whistles, like compressors, were never intended to be in his cars. Twin ignition, an overhead camshaft driven by an upright shaft, the 4 valves per cylinder were his creation. But for his race leader and financier, Tim Birkin, the formula of victory lay in the compressor, so the master yielded. For the suspension, everything remained unaffected. A massive ladder frame and 2 live axles, flat springs and frictional dampers are the ingredients which reasonably prevented the body from lifting off. The interior, insofar as you can talk about the interior of an open tourer, you find comfortable leather seats and a surprising amount of space, although only in terms of length, not width. The driver can enjoy a comprehensive collection of dials which inform him about the operating condition of his car. From the revs, through the coolant temperature, to the turbocharger pressure, everything is communicated in the appropriate style. Even the rather mundane headlamp switch is a little different here than in normal cars. The handbrake is outside, but that doesn't matter because there are no windows in this open tourer anyway, and regardless of the weather, these cars are simply not driven with the roof up.
I once asked the president of the Bentley Drivers Club how often he put up the roof on his car in the 37 years that he'd owned it, and he looked at me with a very strange look and he said never. So I've never put the roof up on this either, so whatever the weather, when we're on the Kitzbühel Alpen Rally, the hood will stay down.
A major breakthrough in racing success remained out of reach, despite the ambitious team of Tim Birkin and his Bentley boys. But the blower has still not been forgotten, even if Birkin never succeeded in beating class rival Rudolf Caracciola in the Mercedes SSK at Le Mans. There are around 40 blowers in good hands around the world today. The immense fascination of these heavy-breathing old critters is something from which no one can escape.